Okay, so now we're back. Now, if you were following the introduction video, we are now on, let's say, part one, but you can say part two because that was the first video. I really wanted to do the first video as an introduction. So what we have now, I'm going to scooch over a little bit, is I've taken my clay and now you remember that I did this in the first video as the introduction to show you that you can do textures, and we're going to use the clay there. However, I stopped doing that for a moment. We still have our same jar, but what we want to do now is, or at least what I want to do is begin to soften or condition clay. And I did most of it obviously off camera. So now I'm just going to continue, and just to let you know that sometimes clay can take a while to condition. And let me see if I can put this cord up here so it's a little out of the way. I'm working with a small desk area, and I'm actually in a small room. So I'd advise you, if you're doing this kind of project and you can have, if you have the space in your home, to do it on a surface that is pretty ample. I mean, I've got paints over here and paints over there and paint brushes, and so I'm kind of relegated to this area. However, it is good enough. I do have underneath my clay a glass frame. I leave the frame in its home, in its original casing here, so that I can kind of contain, any fragments of clay that might pop out, or if I'm rolling it like this. So I have Kato clay, Kato polymer clay here, and I'm not going to be continually working with this on camera because it's extremely hard, I think, to soften and condition. It takes a lot of hand time, and again, I would do this when I'm watching TV or listening to music, or however, just something that will distract you while you make this clay more malleable. It's very, very, very really firm, so you're going to need the hand power, and so get that strength going, and the time. Okay, if you have a different kind of clay, which this is not Kato clay, but this is Kato clay, and this is this clay here mixed with this clay, which is Kato polymer clay. They're both polymer clay. This was a ball that I mixed just like this. What I'm going for with this is a more translucent color. And I'm doing this because my hope is to put it as an option on my glass. Okay, so you do have to consider that when you're incorporating clay onto glass, if it's polymer clay, and you do want to know what your design is going to be, if that makes any sense. You can wing it for a certain amount of time. Like I've been thinking I'm going to be incorporating this angel, which you saw in the first video, onto my jar. I like that it's broken, it looks aged. We're going to try to age it even more without making it too overdone. What you have in your mind, you have to be very clear when you want to put it, from theory to reality. So I'm using this idea as a backup in case I don't want to just rely on just the dark color, the one-dimensional color, and I might want a little bit more color. So I've done this off camera, and I'm just showing you how it's pretty. I've been working on this for about an hour and probably more than that, and it's still very, very hard. I'm no expert on how long one needs to work with Kato especially if it needs a lot of conditioning. I'm not sure. I'm sure that I've worked on one prior to that for more than an hour. I would say 2.5 hours. And that's just trying to make sure that it's really, and you can hear that it's very stiff. And so it will take time. So I advise you, if you buy Kato clay, to be able to have the time and effort to spend making it just so. Now, that ball will probably be put aside. It probably will not be, encompassing this particular vase. Let me turn another light on in case that might help. I don't know how much it would help, but let's hope it helps more. Okay, so now I'm going to attempt to cut this down a little bit. I do have a blade somewhere, a wide blade that you can slice downward. I do not think it's right here with me right now, so I'm just going to go forward. So I'm going to take most of this. See how crispy it is? It's honestly, to tell you the honest truth, it's not my favorite clay to work with. It is a very good clay. Like, I do like the quality of it. But, again, you have to have the patience and the strength and the interest in continually conditioning this to where, and you can see I am wrestling with it. So if you feel that you don't have a lot of gunpowder, you don't have that arm strength or that wrist strength, hand strength, where you can do this for a few hours, or if you have some leisure time and you're sitting in front of your TV, it's probably a good thing to do. But if you don't feel that you have that, I would say buy a different clay. So this is, again, Kato clay. Now I'm going to just put this aside and we'll get back to it perhaps at a later time. But I wanted to share that with you. So let's put that aside. Okay, and let's go with good old easy Sculpey. So this is, again, Hobby Lobby. And I want to go ahead and do, sometimes I wish they would make the paper that these things come in. I almost feel like I want to do almost the entire little brick here. Now again, you're still going to feel like you've got to condition, but you can see this is a lot softer. So let's go ahead and condition this on camera. And I hope you're following along. I hope that you've already gotten your tools that you may need. It's best to have as much that you can in front of you ready to go. So you're just kind of streamlining your creativity and processing here. And of course, I'm always forgetting like a tool or something, or I can't put everything in front of me, but if you can have your basis of what you want, so you might want your baubles, which are still here. You might want to have a cutting tool. You make sure your surface is correct so that nothing's sticking to it. This will really damage any surface, so instead make sure you have a piece of glass or plexiglass. If you don't have a glass piece that you love, something that's specially cut or designed for you, then you can go pick up an empty frame at the dollar store or Walmart, wherever that you shop for home goods. As long as it's not expensive. You just want something that has the glass in it and it's a good decent piece of glass. You don't want that really thin glass that just wants to shatter on you. Get a decent piece of glass, or again, go to your hardware store. I don't know if Lowe's does it, but I know if you're near an Ace Hardware near me does cut plexiglass and glass for you. So that's just a good tip to know. So now you want to pick whatever clay that you're going to use. In my case, I intend to use a green. You want to begin, again, this is conditioning. See how easy this is to condition. And I will pull my pasta machine out, and I hope I can show it here, because again, the space that I'm working with is about as wide as your view is on the filming now. So I don't have a ton of extra room, because on the sidelines I have paints and stamps and paper and you name it, I have it. And so those are on the perimeter. So, I'm working within that perimeter. And of course, I have some completed altars that I've done, live edge altars, that are kind of on the top side of this. And if you need any encouragement, if you're going along right now and you're starting to condition your clay, I just will put this here as an encouragement of what before and after can look like. And it's not just this one. I have another one as well that I could show you, but I think this is a good representation because it doesn't represent what this used to look like, what this looks like now and what that used to look like. So it's a good motivator to help your creative juices flow. And again, it's in the early evening when you're starting to do this type of stuff. If at all possible, you do want to have a good hour or so set up ahead. Some of us, of course, are going to dive deep and we're going to be here till it finishes, all in one fell swoop. In this particular video that I'm sharing with you today, you are here because you were interested when you saw the tutorial video, the intro video, and you wanted to go ahead and get the tools that you needed, and you wanted to start your tutorial on how to create beautiful glass vessels with clay, paint, or what have you. Now, with this particular video, we are going over clay. So there may be some painting involved, but you are going over with clay. It is the clay tutorial for a glass vessel. If you know my work, you know that if you've seen any of my work, I do a lot of different things, but if you've seen any of my glass vessels, you know that they can be painted, they can be decoupaged, and they can also be clay. So today we're starting with clay because I've been asked so many times how to, if I would do, it's not so much how to do it, it's that if I would do a tutorial. And this tutorial is the second in the series of how to do your glass vessel in clay. So at this time you should have what you need to start, which was the vessel itself, the glass vessel, any baubles or any chains or anything. You can still collect them. In the next video, you'll be able to go to your next step, which will definitely be adhering things onto it. And that's always at the end. Primarily at the end, I won't say always. And so I've laid them out here just to give you some ideas. You have broken pieces of tile, or maybe you have something, a necklace or something that you love, the cabochon, and you want to keep it, the chain, if you have chain that you think would be decorative. So those I would all call baubles. Okay, so I flattened this out. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my two pieces, put them down for a second. And if you have, that's what it does to your hands. If you have a pasta machine, you should get it now. and you should be rolling your pieces out. I'm going to go get mine again because there's no room for that. Okay, so it's a little bulky, and that's the one thing that I don't love about it, is it is a little bulky. So you should be rolling out your clay now. Again, this is glass, so we want to be careful. This is, I want to show you, mine's a little, because I've been using it, it is a little clay-like. So it's got little fingerprints all over it. And this comes out like so. Excuse me about the camera. I don't want you to. So you put your handle in and you now this won't work here, so I have to go off to the side here. But that's your pasta maker. It's a typical pasta maker. It's always good to hang it off the edge. So I'm just going to go ahead and quickly roll it. And I'm going to fold it in half and see how that does. Because I think, so you can still be conditioning your clay. And I don't think you need to really see that how you put the clay in. You just put it at the top, hold it down a little bit, and roll the handle. You can hear it rolling now, just like if you were putting pasta dough through. Okay, and then it will come out as some type of sheet. It will come out like, here's mine. Mine just came out like this. And I'm going to do it again because I'm crazy like that. Like, why isn't once enough? I don't know. If you are one of those people who are A personality type personalities, you know, perfection, or has to be a certain way, then yes, you might want to roll it a few times. Okay. Okie dokie. All right. So for the most part, I'm not too concerned with the shape. Let me just put my pasta machine out of the way. My space gets smaller. Now, if you have a small jar like this, you can clearly see that for me, if you are like me, you are going to just kind of expect it to be somewhat like this. Okay, you don't want to be doing anything too technical. You just want to see where this lies. Does this lie where you want it to lie? And will it be enough to cover the entire bottom? Or do you want to leave the bottom glass open, or are you going to put this on a base of some sort? There's a lot of questions at this point you should be asking yourself. And the best time for me, being a creative type, is like, I like to see, you know, do I want this to come down to the bottom, or do I want this to be cut off here and use it to patch this area? So unroll it and basically use this as your, let's see, your guideline. Whoops. Now I wouldn't probably want to waste in putting it at the bottom when you can paint the bottom, but that doesn't mean that that's not what you would want to do. You have to be away from where you put the cap. So let's just put the cap on. A little bit cumbersome, but just put it on just so you know that it can close properly. Okay, so you see you can close, and there's a lip here. So since it's all the way down, I can take it up just a bit more. Again, if this is a jar that you want not to use a cap on, so you don't want a cap, then you don't need to take it all the way up. But for me, in this particular design, yeah, I think I want the cap to come on and off like this one does. It screws on and off just like any other jar, glass jar. But this is going to be a vessel, right? Okay, so here it is. Now, this is an awful lot of material that is not going to be where I need it. So instead of doing all the fancy stuff, why don't we, you and I, let's push this back. Hopefully you can see very, very well. Let me know if you cannot. Sometimes shadows are cast with the lighting, especially in this room. It's the side of the house that's not so bright after a certain time frame. So go ahead and begin scoring your clay. It does not have to be perfect. Just make sure you're holding it so that it's roughly in the place that you're going to want it. This is a great project to do on a day that you have the time devoted to maybe do it pillar to post. So complete the whole project in one fell swoop. Or if you're a person that likes to take it slow, or you don't have the time to do it in one fell swoop, then you can simply make sure you come back to the video, stop the video, and come back when you know you have the time to do the next steps. So right now, okay, so this is a part now, and it looks lovely. Doesn't it look lovely? All right, so there happens to be some white picked up from this big old slab of Kato polymer clay. Now, I love to act like a little rat and open the packages really crazy. They rip pretty easily anyway, but the truth is I really like everything to be just precisely when I open it, but I didn't have the tool. I actually opened this at my kitchen table, and I kind of didn't have the tool to cut, so I broke it off. So that's what it looks like. It's fairly hard. So again, if you're buying Kato poly clay, look up how you can soften it. You can actually buy, I think, a liquid polymer, and it'll help soften it. Some people have used lotion, a little bit of lotion on your hands. And I use a nice warm room. If you're in a cold climate, you definitely want the warmest room, or a room with maybe a heater in it so that your hands are nice and warm. Okay, so as you see, it's imperfect. Okay, I hope that's picking up on the camera because, you know, that's what we're dealing with. We have limited light here. I wonder if it's at the end of the day here, so in the Eastern Hemisphere. So I don't know where you are, but light is going bye-bye very, very quickly. Okay, so here we are. You have part of your glass already covered. Real simple, easy peasy, right? Now you just want to begin to work with these edges. The other thing that you can do if you feel uncomfortable with your jar being covered with clay and you're like, oh, will it be okay? Will it adhere? If for some reason you're just one of those people that like to feel more confident and use a adhesive, you can certainly use Sculpey translucent liquid. Excuse me, it's Sculpey brand, but it's translucent liquid Sculpey. So any liquid polymer clay you can use, and you can brush it on just like glue, like you would a glue, any adhesive, and then go ahead and put your clay on. I find when I do that, it's cool and everything, but for me, it ends up being a little bit movable, like sliding. So with this method here, it doesn't really slide on me. I'm pretty cool with this without putting any I have used it, but I don't really, it's not my go-to. So go ahead and start shaping these pieces down here so that they, look right. Okay. Now, I don't necessarily have a ton of this color, and that's why I wanted to mix some other colors, because I do want to do another project with, this is translucent polymer clay with a little bit of colored regular Sculpey clay or whatever, and it's, to merge them together is not the most fun I've ever had. So that takes a little bit longer. But what we have here is now we have a gap. And so the artist in me says this gap is cool. Okay, the gap with the glass. To me, it's cool, right? And to some people it might not be. But there's so much that you can do with this, which if you just left it like this, if you want to be unique, different, crazy, avant-garde, you could leave it like this. You can shape it into something. You can take another piece and put it here. For me, and for the sake of this video, I am going to fill it in because, again, this is only the second video after the introduction. This is the first video actually showing how to do this process, right? It's the only one. So you're really just starting on this tutorial. And so for me, let's not leave the gap, is what I'm saying. We're going to go ahead and fill it in. So just kind of work on that. I'm not being fast because I want to make sure that you are seeing the little things that I'm doing here. For other people who are watching this video, some people are going to be faster. They're going to be, okay, this is fine. I've smoothed it out enough that I care about, and I'm going to go to the next step. But let's just understand all together that as we're on the same page, I am going moderately slower than I would if I was just in my room here at my art desk. Just now you can see there's still texture down here, so we both know right now that these edges are not beautiful, right? I'm not so worried about it because the more that I touch this clay, and if you're using a Sculpey clay or any of the clays that are a lot softer, like souffle and all these other ones that are very easy to condition and very light, you'll know that the more that you touch it with warm hands, the more melty and easier to work with. But sometimes it gets not liquidy, but it gets very, very soft, like mush. And so then you become, twice as hard to, get it going. So for me, this is what I like to do, is just take my time with it and get those edges in. Now this video is part 2, so you understand that there are other parts coming up. And it may be that when I do this video, I may put it in all one video, and you'll just go part 1, part 2, and you'll see that I'll put notes that'll say part 2, and or it may actually be part 1, and then you'll have to go and click on to a whole different separate video, part 2, and that is only so that if I do it that way, that is so that somebody can stop and come back and know that they don't have to go through the whole video again. Going through the whole entire video just to see a part, just to get back to a part. So hopefully I'll know by the end of this tutorial. I've done other tutorials on other things, but in terms of this clay glass vessel jar, this will be the first video, and I may do other examples of other work. Again, decoupage, rhinestone, painting right on the glass, and etc., etc. But let's start with this one, which I think is really much easier if you want to use clay. And at the end of the video, I'll explain that you can use other methods as well, other clays. Okay, so that's where we're at right now, smoothing it out so it looks nice and smooth. Definitely trying to have it appear that it's the same or similar I'm looking for a tool, the same or similar thickness at the edge. Now they have tools that are like rubber tools that I don't have those, but if you have some tools like that, I don't think you need every tool that they ever make for polymer clay. Sometimes your hands are the best way to shape and mold things, okay? But if you have the little rubber tools, I do not, you can actually just kind of, with the rubber, just kind of go along the edge and push it back. So, because you want to make it, as far as I'm concerned, with my jars, you want to make them as smooth as possible because you don't want to feel like you need to go and sand with a sander or with a piece of sanding paper later on to get those things smooth. You just, at the end of a project, you just want it to be as close to what you envisioned when you started. And if it's better than that, then that's just a bonus. So we're spending most of the time right now just making this be as smooth as it can. So, I'm trying to avoid having to sand. But for the sake of the video, in case you do have some uneven edges or they're like wobbly or not smooth, to me, it's okay if they're a little thicker in one place and another, just a little. But you can always remedy that by just, you don't want to have any. So for me, I like to flatten it out and roll it as I do this. That's what I like to do. It can still be done later, and I'm going to just go on in a minute, but it's best to get things right the first time. And I know this is just the first glass vessel that you're doing, or maybe you've done other ones and you're just trying to figure out how to do glass vessels that I do. Sorry about my lingo there, doing ones. But if you are just trying a different method and I do a very basic method. I feel like we work at things sometimes too hard, and we have to just enjoy the process sometimes. And other times what you can do is you can kind of cut away those jagged little pieces, pull them off, and you form a straighter line. Sometimes, sometimes not. Okay. All right. So again, the warmer, it's cold here. It's not too cold today, but it's chilly where I'm at. So it's not so much the clay is, warming up and melting or anything. I call it melting, but it's really just getting really extra soft and malleable. So there we have that. Now we have this gap, and I told you as an artist, for me, I'm like, that's cool, right? Because I can do stuff with that. I could go down the list of all the stuff that I could do with that, but I'm not. All right. Now at this point, you would use this tool to cut a straight line, or you would look for, if you're smart, you would look for a cutter. And for some reason, I don't see my cutter. It's probably right under my nose. Whoops. Right under my nose, and I don't see it. It just makes it a lot easier if you just have a cutter. It's more straight. Your lining would be more straight right off the bat. But since I don't have my cutter in front of me, like I said, I have a ton of tools, and often when I'm working, I just stick them in whatever jar is in front of me, and I just keep it moving. All right, so I like the cleanest edge that I can possibly get. So to get this edge the way I want to, I have to take this off. Just be careful of when you're touching the clay, because remember, this has ability to have impressions in it. It can be flattened in places, so you really have to be diligent with it. Okay, I some reason like the edge that's most seamless, so I'm going to be creating this fit. I'm going to be creating that fit. Hopefully the volume's not too loud, because I am pretty close here. Okay, so right here, we go like this. And that's what I like about the softer clays, is that, and really you don't need to use something like Kato polymer clay, because on a jar like this, you don't really need to, simply because any clay should hold up well. It's just kind of what I had, and I wanted to do a certain effect with the translucent, and there are other translucents anyway, so it's not a big deal, but we're gonna do this. So now that you've cut it, and if you've done like me, you're patching it together, go ahead and start that process. And again, that's a process just like everything else is. Now, I have, my nails are usually longer, but for this, it's not why I cut them off, but it kind of is. But I feel like a lot when I'm working with clay, because I don't always work with clay, I do a lot of painting, watercolor and acrylic. And so I just feel that if I cut my nails, I don't have all that underneath. Now for me, with the jar, and I'm, mending this together, it's for me about making that gap go away, right? So to make that gap go away, use your fingertips and push it together. Push it together, mold it together, press it together, and roll it. You can roll it and kind of get that seam hidden. You can first make sure it's all level with each other, of course, once you start that. That's where I'm at right now, but for me, there's no magic. Just be gentle with the side that isn't being molded together, Just be gentle with the side, like this side. That is fine, perfectly fine. Just be careful with it. See, we have some translucent clay that picked up from the table. So you just want to make sure you're not doing crazy indentations that you can't get out of. You want to overlap it just a little so that the gap just isn't about a gap. It's more about just making sure you can push and mend that strip. Okay, so now there's going to be indentation, so you can't be panicked about that. Okay. Now you see how it's coming together. Just keep pushing this together. Try not to be too harsh. Don't fear that you're going to, that it's like, oh, you have this irregular piece here and you have to be crazy with it, like be gentle, take your time, use your artistic creative self, and just know that it's going to come together and that seam won't even show, right? Well, that's what I tell myself when I'm doing it. Like, that seam is not even going to show up, and when I'm done with this, it's going to be smooth, right? Just take your time and be concerned that you're making sure that that gap is together. And that can include you gently bringing some clay over from one side to the other. See where I'm getting at? See how it's starting to disappear? It's still a little lumpy, but we're making it disappear. And this is a good exercise because I think sometimes some people think it's just a painted vessel or just a painted glass jar. Well, it's only a painted vessel or a treasure jar when you have completed everything to where it's, turning out to be something totally different. It goes from the plain jar to this, and then on its way to something that's finished and useful for something that you can do. This one, by the way, has a painted bottom with the edges kind of incorporated into it. I've decided I probably will do the same thing. I probably will paint the bottom. Some people can actually, just let me reach some people will actually put clay at the bottom. For me, I don't think I need to. I don't think I really need to do that. Okay, so again, don't worry about this. Don't worry about this too much. You've smoothed it out. We were smoothing it out just a few minutes ago before we started our little seam. And you will continue to smooth out your seam by either doing the process like I am, which is overlapping the clay over the line there, that gap. I hit the camera again. And just kind of making that, smoothing that out to something a little bit more aesthetic, if you will. Just keep doing that. I like to use my entire finger and gently drag it across. Again, if you have the tools that you think would be better for that, you can surely use those. But if you want to learn how to make it a more smoother, smooth out the seam and make it a little bit more smoother without using tools, because sometimes they're cumbersome or your hands get tired or what have you, then you can follow along by practicing as I smooth out this seam. And there's plenty of other videos that show how to do tricks and tips with polymer clay when you're using polymer clay on different applications, different projects. So with this project, this is the way I do it. This is what the tutorial's about. And we are on video 2 for those of you who, get confused easy. You have little kids and you're got a lot of noise. I have a bunch of animals that are being quiet right now. It's like a godsend. And so we can take this time together to do this. And hopefully it's like exciting and learning. And again, this is just the process where you're adhering your clay and molding your clay to your jar. Now see, this clay is starting to rise up. So what I like to do, I don't know if I can do it right now, but I like to do is I like to just test. Yes, like to test if it's moved up. So it's moved up a little, so that will need to be fixed. The clay has, from pushing and holding it, it's slid up. So we don't want that. So just keep an eye on that. Put that into check shortly. We will shortly worry about that in a minute. Right now, we just have to get these as smooth as we can. Now, this still needs to make this gap a lot closer. So we need to go ahead and work on that. If you have a gap as well in this exact area, you want to make sure it's coming together as much as possible. Now, at this point, I can actually go ahead and just start to, my blade doesn't really drag, so I kind of like, it's like kind of chop, drag, okay? But your blade may be a lot, I use this blade with paint as well, so it's a little choppy. But if you can, it'll be a great time with your sharper blade to go ahead and cut away this clay, that wing of clay that was there. And you'll be doing the same thing that you did at the base of this. Okay. You'll be doing the same that you did at the base, and it should be pretty easy. And the more that you work with the clay, I feel the more intuitive both the clay is to you and you are to the clay. Less worrying about how you're gonna fix the little bumps and bruises, the less it's a concern and the faster you work. So don't worry about perfection in terms of it has to be grade A right this minute. No, you just need to get your bones in perspective here. And again, like I said, this side is now pretty much the right size, but this one is a little higher, and this is the side that was raising. So you can actually just walk your finger and push down. Okay, just push it down. You don't want it to be wavy unless you want it to look like the top of a paper bag. I want mine straight, so I'm trying to push down but then straighten that back out again to a straight line. I do not want a paper bag effect. Okay, so we're going to be closing out this section of the video, which is part 2. This is the part after the first introduction, which the introduction was free. So if you've come here because you watched the free introduction tutorial that tells you what basic things you'll need to start this project and to go ahead and create a vessel with me with polymer clay and a 6 or 8 ounce. I think this is actually a 6 ounce. I haven't been able to, I did look it up. I haven't been able to find my invoice. So when I do, I will. But by sight, you can take any jar that's, you know, about this size. They're not hard to find. They're short canning jars. You can search those online. They have 4 ounces. I know that, but this I believe is, I think it's an 8 ounce. So, and again, I will search longer to clarify that for sure. But so now you get the gist of it. You'll be doing that primping and propping of this. It seems like it's long because we're in this video together and we are doing this tutorial together. And right now, all we're trying to do is shape the darn thing, right? And so it's going to seem like a lot, because you are actually trying to make, again, if you're building a house, the foundation, you know, is the most important and first steps besides the architectural aspects. So you want to make sure that you've got the basis down. So you don't want a lot of wobbly weebly areas, because when you build upon those wobbly areas, sometimes you just keep getting more wobbly, right? And the other thing with that is that you really want to smooth it out, because you do want it smooth. You want it as smooth as you potentially can get it. You don't want to look at it and see waves, but you also aren't aiming for perfection at this time. You just want it to be smooth as you can get it, right? Because you're going to be putting a type of texture on this if you're going to be doing this like I am doing it. If you're following this tutorial and making a similar design in your own fashion, similar to what I'm doing, then yeah, you're going to definitely want to make sure you're taking your time at this point, because the most fun is when you're either going to paint something on it or you're going to continue with clay or baubles. So the design part, this is the design part, but this is just the interim of the design part. Okay, so we are going to wrap it up and just quickly go over, not quickly, but briefly go over to make sure that you have everything you're going to need going forward to the next steps. You can still do this primping and propping of your jar to make sure you're in good light, because I'm in the end of the day here and it is getting darker. I'm on the side of the house where there's less light from the sun. It is not facing the sun at this time of the day. So, and it is winter, and it's cloudy. So I have all these odds not in my favor for this jar to be in the best of light. So with that being said, we want to make sure that you can see